In the year 1914, as the world teetered on the edge of chaos, one man looked south, not toward war or empire, but toward the last great blank space on Earth, the frozen heart of Antarctica. His name was Ernest Shackleton, an explorer, a dreamer. A man who believed that courage was not found in conquest, but in endurance. At the dawn of the Great War, when Europe was already burning with ambition, Shackleton was consumed by a different fire. The fire to cross the Antarctic continent from sea to sea, through the pole itself. It was madness to some, glory to others. But to Shackleton, it was destiny. He placed an advertisement, just a few lines in the newspaper. Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Thousands replied. Men from every corner of Britain, each with their own reasons. Adventure, pride, escape, or simply the chance to be part of something greater than themselves. Among them were names that would be written into legend. Frank Wilde, the loyal second-in-command. Tom Crean, the quiet Irishman whose strength defied the elements. And a young photographer, Frank Hurley, who would capture the ice and the soul of the voyage. Together they would form the crew of a ship that would soon become as famous as the men who sailed her. Her name was Endurance. In August 1914, the Endurance left the docks of Plymouth. Her black hull gleamed in the morning light, her sails tight against the wind, and the air filled with cheers, music, and hope. No one on that deck could imagine that it would be nearly 3 years before they would see home again. As the ship cut south, the world changed behind them. War consumed Europe. Empires clashed. But in the endless blue of the South Atlantic, the men of the Endurance chased a different fate. They passed the equator, then the roaring 40s, and finally entered the screaming 50s, where the winds of the Southern Ocean never rest. The seas grew wild. Waves taller than cathedrals crashed upon the deck. The ship groaned, timbers bending, ropes singing in the cold wind. But Shackleton stood firm at the helm. He believed in the ship and in the men who followed him. When storms rose, he was there. When fear spread, his calm was unshaken. He was not a man who ruled by command, but by example. And the men, they would have followed him to the ends of the earth. And in truth, they were about to. By December 1914, the Endurance reached the edge of the Weddell Sea. Before them, an endless plain of ice. A world of silence, where the sun circled but never set, and the horizon glittered like broken glass. They were alone now, in the kingdom of the cold. Penguins watched their arrival, curious, unafraid. Leopard seals lounged on floating ice, the true lords of this realm. The men laughed, took photographs, and believed their journey had only just begun. But the sea had other plans. On the first days of January 1915, the ice began to close around the Endurance. At first it was gentle, a slow whispering pressure. Then, with the groan of a dying beast, the pack tightened. The ship shuddered. Timbers cracked. The world of motion became a world of stillness. Shackleton stood on deck, watching as his ship was gripped by the frozen ocean. He said nothing, only adjusted his coat and whispered, "We are trapped." Thus began the long, cold wait. A journey not across the continent, but into the heart of Endurance itself. In that silence, among the creaking ice and endless night, the men would soon discover that the greatest test was not the cold, nor the hunger, but the strength of the human spirit. And this was only the beginning. The ice had closed its jaws around the Endurance. Day by day, the ship sank deeper into the grip of the frozen sea. The men could hear it, the groaning, the cracking, the eerie sound of wood bending under impossible weight. At first, they believed it was temporary, that the sun would rise higher, the ice would loosen, and the sea would release them. But Antarctica does not bargain. Weeks turned into months. The Endurance drifted with the pack ice, a prisoner, carried wherever the wind commanded. No open water, no escape. Only the endless white. In the nights, the ice spoke. It cracked like thunder, rolled like distant drums beneath their feet. Some nights the men woke in panic, thinking the hull had split apart. But Shackleton would rise, calm as ever. He would light his pipe, walk across the creaking deck and whisper, "Sleep, boys. She still floats." His confidence became their hope. Inside the ship, life continued. They hunted seals and penguins for fresh meat. They played music, read aloud from old books, and wrote diaries in the dim lantern light. Frank Hurley captured it all. The frozen beauty, the laughter amid despair, the moments of stillness that felt like eternity. His glass plates, frozen and cracked, would one day tell a story that words could not. By March 1915, the temperature dropped to 40 below. The sun vanished beyond the horizon, and the long polar night began. Darkness, unbroken for months. The men lived by routine, feeding the dogs, cutting the ice, measuring the drift. Each day the same as the last. Each night, a test of will. Shackleton called it the spirit of endurance. He told them, "We cannot control the ice, but we can control ourselves." And so they waited. Then, one night in October, it began. The ice moved with terrible force. It heaved and cracked, lifting the Endurance sideways, The sound was deafening, like 1,000 rifles firing at once. The men ran onto the deck. They saw the ship twisting, the timbers breaking, the masts groaning against the sky. Shackleton ordered, "Abandon ship!" But still, they hesitated. It was more than a vessel. It was home, dream, and symbol. The heart of everything they had believed in. Yet, even a heart of oak can be broken by ice. On the 21st of November, 1915, the Endurance finally gave up her fight. The ice crushed her hull. Water poured in. And slowly, she disappeared beneath the frozen sea. The men stood in silence, watching her go. Frank Hurley lowered his camera. Frank Wild whispered a prayer. Shackleton simply said, "She's gone." And with her went their last connection to the world. Now they were 28 men, alone on the ice, hundreds of miles from land, thousands from home. No radio, no rescue. No one even knew they were alive. And yet, not one man broke. They built camps upon the ice, named them Ocean Camp, and later, Patience Camp. Each name a reflection of their will. They hunted seals for food, melted snow for water, and wrote letters that would never be sent. They dreamed of their families, and of green fields far beyond the white horizon. Through it all, Shackleton never lost his calm. He visited every tent, spoke to every man. He joked when they were afraid. He worked when they were weak. And he never, ever allowed despair to speak louder than hope. Frank Wild later wrote, "The boss never let us see fear. He carried it quietly, like a burden he refused to share." By April 1916, the ice began to break apart. Their frozen prison was dying, and with it, their last chance to stay together. Shackleton gathered the men. He looked at the distant black water and said, "We make for the sea." The next chapter of their ordeal was about to begin. Boats against the storm. Men against the impossible. The Endurance was gone, but her name was only beginning to prove its meaning. April 1916. The ice that had held them prisoner was now breaking apart. The men could hear it, like cannon fire beneath their feet. Cracks spread for miles, black water rising between walls of white. Shackleton gathered his men on the floe. He pointed toward the open sea. "Gentlemen," he said, "the ice has decided for us. We sail for land, 28 men, 3 small lifeboats, hundreds of miles of open, freezing water. No maps, no rescue, only the will to live." They packed what little they had left, tents, food, instruments, and the ship's log, the story of their vanished world. The dogs were gone now, the laughter too. Only the groan of the sea and the endless sound of ice breaking beneath their boots. For 7 days they marched across drifting floes, dragging their boats behind them. Each step a battle, each hour a test. Men fell into crevasses and were pulled out by ropes. Frostbite turned fingers black. Sleep came in shivers. Dreams came in whispers. But no one gave up. At last they reached open water, The wind screamed across the sea. The temperature was below zero. Shackleton gave the order. "Launch the boats!" The men pushed their small wooden lifeboats into the freezing waves. They named them like old friends: James Caird, Dudley Docker, Stancomb Wills. Names that would soon become the vessels of survival. The moment they hit the open ocean, chaos erupted. Waves rose like black mountains. Salt spray froze instantly upon their faces. Men bailed water with bare hands, their fingers bleeding, their lips cracked with cold. Days turned to nights, nights into endless motion. They rode without sleep, their arms numb, their minds fading between hope and delirium. Frank Wilde kept the men singing, old shanties, hymns, anything to drown the sound of fear. Hurley held his camera in his coat, protecting the film even as ice formed on his beard. And Shackleton, he steered, he watched, and he never looked away. After 7 days at sea, they sighted land, a dark shape on the horizon. The first solid ground in more than a year. It was Elephant Island, cold, barren, and desolate. But to them it was paradise. They staggered ashore, fell to their knees, kissed the frozen stones. For the first time in months, they were not adrift. They built fires, set up tents, and let the warmth of hope return. But hope was fragile. Elephant Island lay far beyond any shipping routes. No one would come for them. And with winter closing in, they knew they could not survive long here. So Shackleton made his decision. He would take one boat, the James Caird, and sail for rescue. 800 miles of open sea separated them from South Georgia Island, where a whaling station might still be manned. It was impossible, suicidal, but it was their only chance. He chose 5 men to go with him. Frank Worsley, the navigator; Tom Crean, the unbreakable; Tim McCarthy, John Vincent, and Harry McNish. They shook hands with the others, 22 men left behind on Elephant Island, and promised to return. Frank Wilde stood watching as the James Caird drifted into the fog. He shouted, "We'll see you again, boss!" And Shackleton raised his hand in silent salute. The journey ahead was beyond imagination. 40-foot waves, frozen rigging, endless storms. Every man soaked to the bone, sleeping in turns, their beards white with frost. They bailed, they rowed, they navigated by the stars. Worsley read the sun's position through clouds of snow, his fingers too numb to write the numbers. And yet, somehow, they endured. After 16 days on the open sea, 16 days of torment, a dark outline appeared through the snow. Mountains, the coast of South Georgia. They had made it. But the island's southern coast was sheer cliffs and glaciers. No place to land. Their bodies were broken, their boat barely afloat. Still, they forced their way onto a small, rocky beach. Shackleton fell to his knees, his voice cracking as he whispered, "We are saved." But salvation was still half a world away. The whaling station and rescue lay on the opposite side of the island. Between them and safety, mountains no man had ever crossed. And so, The final trial began. South Georgia Island, May 1916. The James Caird lay shattered upon the rocks, its timbers broken, its sails torn to ribbons. But 6 men still lived, starved, frostbitten, exhausted beyond words, and yet alive. For Shackleton, it was not enough. 22 men still waited, far across the sea, on a forgotten island named Elephant. To save them, he would have to cross the island. No maps, no rest. Only mountains, glaciers, and faith. At dawn on May 19th, 3 men set out. Ernest Shackleton, Frank Worsley, and Tom Crean. They carried nothing but a rope, an axe, and a small cooker for tea. Ahead lay 30 miles of ice and stone, never before crossed by any human being. They climbed through blizzards, crawled across ridges, and slid down frozen slopes with ropes burning their hands. At times the fog closed in so thick they could not tell sky from ground. They marched by instinct, by the pull of something greater than sight. At one point, Shackleton thought he heard music, a phantom organ drifting through the storm. Later he would write, "It seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. Many would later call it divine intervention. Perhaps it was endurance itself, guiding them forward. After 36 hours of climbing without sleep, they reached a final ridge. Below them, a dark valley and the roofs of Stromness whaling station. Civilization. The sound of dogs. The faint whistle of a steam engine. Shackleton stopped. His voice broke as he whispered, "We've done it." Then he turned to his men. "Now, we go back." The whalers could hardly believe their eyes. Ghosts, they called them. Men who had walked out of legend, faces hollow, eyes bright with something unbreakable. Shackleton refused rest. He begged for a ship, any ship, to rescue the men left behind. 3 attempts failed. Sea ice crushed the vessels. Storms drove them back. But he would not stop. He could not. And then, on August 30th, 1916, more than 1 year after the Endurance had sunk, he finally returned to Elephant Island. The men saw a dark shape on the horizon. A ship. They ran to the shore, shouting, waving. Frank Wild cried out, "The boss! The boss is coming!" Not a single man was lost. 28 men went into the ice, and 28 men came home. When news reached London, the world was already deep in war. There were no parades, no medals, no songs. But to those who knew the story, the Endurance became something greater than fame. It was proof that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to keep moving, even when hope itself freezes. Shackleton would later write, "Through endurance, we conquered." And those words became more than a motto. They became the heartbeat of every explorer who followed. Years later, when he returned once more to the south, the place he called the White Wilderness, his heart failed him. He died aboard his ship, the Quest, at anchor off South Georgia. His men buried him there, beneath a cairn of rough stones, facing the sea he loved. And even now the wind still whispers his name, among the glaciers and drifting snow. In the silence of Antarctica, the ghosts of the Endurance drift beneath the ice. Their story, frozen in time, a testament to what humanity can survive and what it means to never surrender. We remember them not for where they went, but for how they endured. Because in the end, the greatest voyage was not across the sea, but within the human spirit. This was the voyage of the Endurance.